I relaxed in my seat on the flight, looking out the window as the plane climbed higher. After 30 years, I was finally heading back for good. I made the decision because I love my wife, Monica. I pulled out I was wearing a Zippo lighter that my wife had given me with a note on it that said, "To my beloved husband Gavin, congratulations, Marine, that's me." Gavin Mitchell. Some people call me Gav or Mitch, but in my military circles I was simply called Gunny. Today I was adding a new title to the list. Retired for more than 3 decades, I wore the uniform. Over 10 of those years I spent in the reserves. I was decorated with medals that held deep personal meaning. I've seen it all and earned every batch, every ribbon. By the time Monica and I got married, I was already in good shape. I met her by chance one day after work. I was a mechanic at a car dealership in Helena. I saw a car stranded on the roadside in Montana. The hood was up and steam was coming from the engine. I offered to help and quickly diagnosed the issue, a broken fan belt. I took her to the auto parts store and fixed it in a few minutes. She was really grateful. I thought I'd never make it back to Billings. "Just get home safe," I replied, ready to be on my way. "Let me repay you," she insisted, smiling. "How about dinner? You like Red Lobster?" I couldn't resist. "Yeah, I love Red Lobster," I said, grinning. She scribbled her name and number. "Great. How about Friday at 7? "Monica, that sounds perfect." I confirmed, and that Friday marked the start of our journey together. 8 months later I proposed, and by 1987 we were married. Monica moved into my home in northern Montana, which meant adding over 30 miles to her commute as a teacher in Billings. We considered moving closer to her job, but I couldn't part with the house. It sits on 5 wooded acres passed down from my folks just off Interstate 990. It's a legacy I hope to one day pass down to our kids, despite the long hours and my commitments with the reserves. She was always there for me, even contributing to my IRA. Our daughter Emily was born about a year and a half into our marriage. Then, in 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and I was called up to active duty for over a year. By the time I got home, our son Charlie was born. After 9/11, things changed. I went on active duty again, rotating between Camp Lejeune in North Carolina and Camp Redstone in Alabama. Monica adapted, getting certified to teach in both states and securing work wherever we ended up. In total, Monica was away from home for over 6 years, including 3 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, and 4 in Okinawa. Despite the challenges, she was a rock for us and the kids. I promised Monica this would be my last deployment at 56. I knew that desert warfare was for the younger guys, so it was time to come home for good after 3 decades of service. You might wonder why I wasn't higher up the ranks. The truth is that I enjoyed a drink with my brothers in arms and defended them fiercely. Even if it meant losing out on a promotion or 2, being a reliable leader was enough for me. I had earned the respect of my Marines. At my retirement party, Lieutenant Colonel Harris showed up. He had disciplined me more times than I could count. We had no hard feelings. In fact, we became friends. He gave me a commendation, and we shared a handshake that sealed our bond. "The Corps won't be the same without you, Gunny," he said with a warm smile. "Thanks, Colonel," I replied. "I trust it's in good hands." Lance Corporal Jenkins. Gunny was surrounded by a few of his buddies when he came over to me with a brown wrapped parcel. It was just a little something to remember us by. "Gunny, this is a gift," I said, unwrapping it and laughing. A wooden hand with a middle finger raised. Jenkins had carved it himself, with the Marine Corps emblem and our unit designation etched into the back. "You made this?" I asked, genuinely impressed. "Sure did," Gunny replied, beaming. "Well, hell of a job," I said, shaking his hand. "I'll treasure it forever." I made my way toward the exit, shaking hands with everyone I passed. "Staff Sergeant Jake Hansen," I said, shaking his hand. The new machine gunner was walking up. I shook his hand and gave him some final advice. "Look after these guys. They're good men." I told him, "I won't let you down." He promised, "You'd better not." I joked, "Or I'll come back and give you hell." The guys laughed. As the plane descended, I said my final goodbyes and looked out at the familiar skyline of Billings, taking in the river, the cliffs, and the landmarks I knew so well. Memories of taking Monica and the kids to the park on weekends flooded my mind once I landed. I scanned the crowd. I'd let Monica know I was coming, but she wasn't there yet. I grabbed my bags, figuring she'd show up soon, but something felt off. I texted her, "Where are you?" but got no reply. I tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I had a sense of unease. I called the house, but there was no answer. I really hoped she was okay. Her parents hadn't heard from her either. "Do you need a lift?" her mother offered, but I said I'd wait and call her if I couldn't find another way to get there. "There is no point in you driving all this way. I'll give you a lift," said a stranger. I was interrupted by a voice offering me a lift. I thought my wife was picking me up, but I admitted I was heading that way. I told him I was going to Montana near Flathead Lake. He offered to cover the gas, but I said I'd at least cover it. He waved it off, saying the company card covers it. I tossed my bags into the back and settled into the passenger seat. I figured he was talking about retirement. I corrected him, saying it was actually 30 years to go. It was a long day. He observed this and introduced himself as Sam Jacobs. I agreed, saying you could say that. As we pulled out onto the highway, he texted me, asking if I had any plans. I shrugged. "I hear you," he chuckled. "I retired after 25 years as an Army lieutenant colonel. But let me tell you, retirement's not all it's cracked up to be." "What do you do now?" I inquired. "I run a camp for men up north," he revealed. I raised an eyebrow. I'd never heard of it. "What's it for?" "It helps men going through tough times," he explained, like what I asked. "Infidelity, for one." He said, "We help them physically, mentally, emotionally, and legally." He went on to tell me more about the methods they use. I was really interested in what he had to say, and in the idea of this camp. I've been given the go-ahead to bring on a senior instructor to oversee the staff, welcome new students, and manage the curriculum. "You're interested?" It definitely piqued my interest. "It feels like we crossed paths for a reason." "You're perceptive, Gavin," he said with a smile. "The company has had its eye on you for a while." I asked him, surprised, "Why, you're a local, a combat vet with an impressive record." He explained that some bar incidents caught our attention. "You're exactly what we need, so your company's been watching me?" I asked, feeling a little worried. "Yes," Sam confirmed. "We've been waiting for your retirement. This job suits you perfectly. The pay is great, the benefits are great, and you'd report directly to me." Intriguing. But there's a catch, isn't there? "You're right." He nodded, handing me a folder. "Take a look inside." I opened the folder and found a report detailing Monica's affair with her school principal, Eric Mackenzie. It spanned over 2 decades. My stomach turned as I saw the enclosed DVD. "Where did you?" I asked, feeling a cold dread settle in. "I won't sugarcoat it, Gavin." Sam replied, "The company vetted you after I showed interest in hiring you. Part of that involved looking into your family life. I assume you didn't know." "Not a clue." I admitted, still in shock. "How do you know it's been going on for 2 decades? "Our investigators are thorough." Sam explained, "They pieced it together from conversations between your wife and Mackenzie. She's been hiding it well. It made sense now. Her frequent absences. The visits that didn't add up. Half. Over the past 20 years she'd spent with him." I had a sudden thought. "What about the kids?" "They're yours," he assured me. "How can you be sure?" I asked our investigators, who confirmed it. Sam replied that they matched your kid's DNA to yours. "I bet you had a feeling she wasn't meeting me at the airport." I did. I confirmed that investigators say they meet after school, and once a week, they go to your place, then he drives home. Sam explained that it's a 70-mile round trip just for a fling. I was in disbelief. How could she? Sam shrugged it off. Long trips and time away can really change people and even strain marriages. "So, what now? If all this is true, is divorce my only option?" I asked Sam, who nodded in agreement. "I'd love to tear him apart, but I won't risk jail." Sam said all the details are in the report. Mackenzie is married with 2 kids, but his family has no idea about the affair. "You swear this is accurate?" I pressed again. Sam affirmed that if he had any doubts, he wouldn't have shown me the report. "I'm sorry, Gavin. You don't deserve this." "Who does?" I muttered bitterly. "Well put," Sam agreed as we pulled into my secluded driveway. "You're really off the beaten path," he remarked, admiring the property. "Yeah, my parents built this place," I replied. "I was hoping Monica and I could stay here together. It looks like it." Sam handed me a business card and said, "Call me when you're ready. Come to the camp. We'll talk, give you a tour, and introduce you around. We have counselors too if you need them. I'm serious about the job, but this comes first." He said it all with a serious look on his face. I could tell he meant what he said. I thanked him and took the folder. "Thanks, Sam," I said. "I'll handle everything. I promise you I'll be in touch. We shook hands. I grabbed my bags before he drove off, heading inside. I carried my things into the bedroom and put them in their place. My mind was still spinning from what Sam had told me. Everything was neat, just the way Monica liked it. She might be a cheating liar, I thought bitterly, but at least she keeps the house clean after putting my stuff away. I changed into some jeans and a t-shirt. I grabbed a shirt and the folder and went downstairs. I needed to see the rest of what was in that report. I pulled out the DVD and slid it into the player. The footage showed Monica and Eric in what looked like a motel room. "So, what are you going to do about him?" Eric asked. "I don't know," she replied. "Maybe not until he retires. If you play your cards right, you could get half of his retirement checks, and most of his savings, and $401k, Eric added. I clenched my fists. What was her plan? Good thing I've got a PR up my sleeve. I'd heard enough to know that when he passed away, everything would be in place for her to take the reins. I grabbed the phone book and called a family law attorney for the next morning. I went upstairs and gathered some of Monica's things, setting the bags by the door. Screw her, I thought. If she wants to leave, I'll let her go. Afterward, I spent some time on the couch, reflecting on my life with Monica. As far as I knew, things were fine between us. We had the same problems every married couple had. I never thought she'd cheat on me with someone like Eric. He looked like a marshmallow. I even laughed out loud at the thought. In all the years we'd been together, I'd never once thought that our lovemaking was causing her physical pain. She never told me. What surprised and impressed me over the years was how she stayed so trim even after our kids were born. I went to my office and opened the cabinet where I kept my tools. On the shelf was an unopened package of duct tape. 2 rolls. I looked at them. I had an idea. I grabbed the tape, a pack of zip ties, and walked over to my weapon cabinet. I pulled out a .45 caliber pistol, made sure it was empty, and headed to the dining room. I spread everything out on the table, made a sandwich, grabbed a beer, and sat down. I was waiting for them to arrive. It was getting dark when I heard a car pull into the garage. A few minutes later, I heard them giggling and chatting as Monica opened the door. Neither of them saw me until they stepped into the main part of the house. Monica's eyes widened. "When did you get here? Didn't you get my emails and messages?" "Sorry, my phone battery died," she said, trying to sound casual. "Things aren't what they seem. Gavin, trust me. I asked you. Is it not you and Eric getting ready to have fun in our bed?" Eric motioned. He turned towards me, and I raised my weapon. He froze, eyes wide, face pale. There were no bullets in the gun. In fact, the magazine didn't even fit the grip. But they didn't know that. "Oh God," he screamed. "Please don't do this." I noticed a wet spot forming in his pants and couldn't help but smile. I told him, "You think you can mess around with another man's wife for over 20 years and just get away with it? I don't think so. Stand against that tree." I looked at Monica and said, "Tie him to the tree." I told her to keep going, and by the time she finished, Eric was stuck to the tree in a cocoon of duct tape, with only his eyes and nose visible and darting around in panic. I walked over, made sure he couldn't move, then smiled and pulled out my cell phone. I dialed his home number, which I had a woman's voice answer, saying it was Caitlin speaking. "Mrs. Mackenzie, my name is Gavin Mitchell. Is your husband Eric home?" "No, he has a meeting at the school tonight. May I take a message?" she replied. "That won't be necessary. I think you should come get him," I said. "Your husband is here at my house with my wife." Eric's eyes widened in terror under the tape. "What is he doing at your house with your wife?" Caitlin asked. Her voice was rising. I replied, "Planning to fool around?" But they changed their minds. Caitlin yelled, "Are you sure about that? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "No, ma'am, it's not a joke. They've been having an affair for over 20 years. That idiot," she screamed. "I'm going to kick his rear. I'll be there as soon as I can." "Where are you?" "I'm off Highway 93. I'll send you directions." "Thanks, Mr. Mitchell," she said, still fuming after hanging up. I told him not to go anywhere with my wife now. He tried to shake his head, but the tape wouldn't let him. I gestured for Monica to head inside. She hesitated, but I waved her forward, and she followed me into the house. I told her to sit on the couch. I picked up the TV remote and I motioned to the DVD player. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Before you say anything, remember I know a lot more than you think." Monica looked down. "It's been a while," she said quietly. "A while?" I repeated. "A while." She lowered her face further. "Longer," she whispered. I said, my voice rising. When did it start? Around 1995, she admitted. We worked together for years, but nothing happened while you were home. We only got together when you were gone, including all those times I was overseas. I asked, my anger growing. She nodded yes. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You weren't supposed to find out, so while I was fighting terrorists and getting shot at, you were here having fun with this loser in our bed. I demanded. Monica started crying. Stop crying and answer the question. She nodded and said, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You weren't supposed to find out, so while I was fighting terrorists and getting shot at, you were here having fun with this guy in our bed. I demanded, Monica, stop crying and answer the question. She wiped her eyes and nodded. She whispered, please, we can get through this. Can't you give me another chance and help me get through this? I was incredulous. Are you kidding me? You think I should just ignore your cheating? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't fire you. It shouldn't affect us, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want a divorce. I knew she was lying. I'd heard what she'd said to Eric. It's too late for that, I replied coldly. I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow. She glared at me defiant. You don't want to do that, she warned Eric. If you try to divorce me, I can take half your pension, the house, everything. I laughed and held up the proposal. There's just one problem with that. I said, remember the proposal you signed? It's still valid. The house is mine. My parents left it to me. The proposal clearly outlined it. What happens if there's infidelity? You'll get 40% of our joint savings, no support, and I'll keep my retirement contributions. I'll fight you, she threatened. I figured you'd say that, I replied, grabbing the TV remote, and hit play on the video of her with Eric. Her face turned white, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, she gasped. How did you get this? Please turn it off. I shook my head. It doesn't matter how I got it, I said. What matters is what your school board will do when they see this. Monica looked at me in shock. I'm going to lose my job, she said, and so will Eric. So you'll sign the divorce papers when you get them? I asked, defeated. She nodded. I turned the volume up and fast-forwarded to the part where she complained about me being too big for her. Can you explain that to me? I asked. We've been together all these years and you never said a word. Why didn't you tell me? She said, at first I liked it and you always turned me on, but after a while it started to hurt and that's why you started making excuses to avoid sleeping. I asked her if she was okay and she nodded. I apologized and she said she was sorry too. I told her I'd taken her purse, keys and house key, and I'd removed her at the moment, and credit cards. But I'd left her STCU card because I knew she had a separate account. I tossed her purse back onto the couch. I guess I should pack and leave, she said quietly. Not yet, I replied. You still have some explaining to do. You need to tell your parents. And let's tell our kids why we're getting divorced. Please don't make me do that, she begged through her tears. Why not? I asked. You had no problem cheating on me for 2 decades. Surely you're not ashamed now they'll hate me, she sobbed. Too bad, I said, picking up the phone. I was just about to call Caitlin's parents when I saw her car pull into the driveway. Looks like she's here. You can start by explaining this to her, I said. A moment later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and found a woman who looked a little younger than me. Well, she was fed and attractive, wearing ripped jeans that fit perfectly. She was eyeing me just as much as I was eyeing her. I asked, "Are you Gavin Mitchell?" She answered, glancing at me. "Yes, I'm Caitlin Mackenzie." I said, "For now, let's get started," and opened the door wider. She widened the door, asking where that piece of trash was hiding. Her eyes narrowed as she said, "Is that a smile?" I liked her already. "He's a little tied up right now," I said, chuckling. "Not going anywhere," Caitlin replied, glaring at Monica. Her face burned with anger. "So you're the cow messing around with my soon-to-be ex-husband," she snarled. Monica's face went pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Caitlin, please stop." "Shut up, you goddamn strumpet," Caitlin yelled. "How can you do this? You're married to this gorgeous piece of man meat, and you're cheating on him with that Pillsbury Doughboy." Caitlin looked at me again. "Where's that idiot?" she asked. "I'll take you to him," I said. I headed to my office, grabbed a box cutter, a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and an old rag. I motioned for Caitlin to follow me outside. When we reached the tree, Caitlin burst into laughter. She was looking at Eric, who was duct taped to it like a cocoon. His eyes were wide with terror, but I could see pure sad satisfaction on Caitlin's face. "I like your style, Gavin," she said with a grin. "It's going to take forever to get him out of this," I replied. "No, it won't take long," I said. Caitlin held up her hand, paused for a second, and then said, "You're a creep." She removed her rings and threw them on the ground. "You haven't touched me in months, and now I know why." I could tell Caitlin was not someone you wanted to mess with. I pulled out the box cutter and cut through the tape. I stepped back as Monica stood to the side. As soon as I freed Eric, he fell to the ground, squirming. "Okay, get up." I told him, "Get your sorry self back in the house." Caitlin watched as Eric stumbled inside. "He's been more fun to watch than I've had in years," she said. Monica pleaded, "Please, haven't you done enough?" "No," I said firmly. "Call your mom and put her on speakerphone." Monica hesitated, but finally dialed her mom. "It's me," Monica said through speakerphone. "Mom?" Her mother's voice came through the speaker. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Monica, Mom, Gavin is kicking me out of the house." Her mother, "Why is he doing that?" "Monica, he found out I cheated on him." Monica pleaded, "I think so." Her mother replied, "But not for too long. No, men do. Do you understand?" "Thank you, Mom. I have no idea what made her do it. Please stay in touch." She added, "I will, Mom, thank you." Before the call ended, I turned to Monica. "You've got 2 more calls to make, so get to it." Monica's face was a mess of tears as she pleaded, "Please don't make me do this, why not?" "They deserve to hear the truth," I said. Trembling, Monica picked up the phone and called our son, Charlie. "Hi, Mom," he answered. "Are you okay?" Monica replied. "Monica and I are getting a divorce." Charlie was shocked and asked, "Did Dad cheat on you or something?" "No, son," Monica replied. "I cheated on your dad and he found out." "How could you?" Charlie asked. "I'm here, son," Monica said. "I'm fine. I just felt you needed to hear the truth. Your mother's been doing this for over 20 years. I only found out today." "Oh my God, Dad," Charlie said. Charlie said, "I'm sorry to hear that." "I'm sorry too, son. I'll talk to you later," Charlie added, ending the call. Monica sat on the couch, her sobs uncontrollable. "One more call?" I reminded her. "Please," she pleaded. "No more calls," I insisted, trembling. Monica dialed our daughter Veronica's number. The call went much like the other, only Veronica was more upset. "You stupid cow," Veronica shouted when Monica explained. "I hope your dad kicks you out. He should. You're not my mother. I don't know who you are, but you better get your act together or you'll never see your grandchildren. Don't call me ever again. Goodbye." Veronica hung up, and Monica broke down, sobbing harder. I watched her for a moment before saying, "Have you started to realize the consequences of your actions? You've completely destroyed 2 families with your selfishness. I hope you're happy." Monica wiped her eyes and whimpered, "I told you I was sorry. Everyone hates me now." "Well, what you sow is what you reap." I replied coldly, "It's time for you to leave. I've already packed your toiletries and some of your things. You can come back." Later on, Monica nodded, got up and went upstairs. She grabbed the suitcase and overnight bag I had left by the bedroom door and came back downstairs. Caitlin stopped her before she reached the front door. "Wait a second," Caitlin said, her tone sharp. "Let me get this straight. Your husband has been messing around with mine for over 20 years. Monica glanced down, ashamed. "Yeah," she mumbled. "Well then," Caitlin smirked, "I guess you won't." "Mind if I poach your Monica?" "What? I've been with a real man for ages and yours seems pretty comfy." Caitlin laughed. "I suppose you're right." "No, you don't," Monica muttered, defeated. "Don't forget to take out the trash," Caitlin shot back, smiling. She grabbed Eric by the collar and added, "I don't care where you sleep tonight, your car or a motel. It's up to you, but I never want to see you again." "Idiot," Eric muttered, shaking his head. "Your lawyer appointment is tomorrow," Crystal said, smiling. "I know," Eric replied, nodding. He glanced at Monica, who was standing nearby. "One last time, I'm sorry, Gavin, for everything. Goodbye." I watched as she left the house. We stood there for a moment, watching as Monica drove off. I could feel my eyes welling up. "You okay?" Caitlin asked, her voice softening. "Yeah, just something in my eye." "Crap," she murmured with a smile. I chuckled, but inside I was still wondering, how do you walk away from 30 years? Caitlin sighed. "Open up to new." She advised me to consider the possibilities. I nodded, admitting that I really didn't know any of this. She asked, "Did you suspect anything with Eric?" I admitted that I had my suspicions, citing her perfume on his clothes as a telltale sign. However, I never caught him. "What's your next move?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I replied. She sighed and said, "I've always been a stay at the moment, I'm not sure. I'm a home wife and mum, that's all I ever wanted. My mum raised me and taught me that the best job for a woman was to be a homemaker. I married straight out of high school and never had a paying job. I just wanted to keep my husband happy and raise my kids right. But I'll figure it out." "You mean what you said earlier about love?" I asked. She chuckled. "Would you like to stay over?" I offered. "Are you sure?" she questioned. "I'd enjoy the company," I assured her. She agreed. That night, we made love before falling asleep. I asked, "Why stick with him?" "Believe it or not," she replied, She loved him once, she admitted, because he was good to her and the kids. "And you loved your wife too, right?" "Yeah, I did." I acknowledged part of me probably always will, but I won't tolerate cheating. I feel the same way. She agreed with me, saying that the marriage is done. "So what's next?" I wondered. "You mean for us?" she clarified. I nodded. "Well," she began, "I like you, Gavin Mitchell. I'd like to see where this goes." "I'd like that too." I agreed, and the next morning, she greeted me with a smile and said, "Good morning, lover. Want some breakfast?" "I'd love it," I replied. "Great," she said. "I've got coffee brewing. What's on your agenda today?" "I've got a lawyer. We discussed the meeting and some work stuff. I'm heading home after breakfast. Then I'll schedule my own lawyer appointment." She said, "See you downstairs." She left the room, and I went through my morning routine, showered, and decided on my Class C uniform. Once dressed, I made my way downstairs. She widened her eyes when she saw me. "Are you in the Army?" she asked. "No, I'm a Marine," I replied. "I'm on terminal leave before retirement." She then asked about the ribbons and badges on my chest. "What are those for?" "They're for being in the wrong place at the wrong." I trailed off, not wanting to give away too much information. "Oh my God," she gasped. "You were wounded in combat, were you?" I confirmed. "Desert Storm in the 90s, then 6 tours between Iraq and Afghanistan. How long have you been in the military?" she asked. "At war," she clarified, "and you knew." "Yes," I affirmed. "What an idiot," she muttered. After breakfast, we stepped outside. She asked me to call her after she got home, and I agreed. The lawyer meeting went smoothly after reviewing my evidence, including the prenup and financial data. He concluded that alimony seemed unlikely due to Monica's income. The house and pension were protected, but the joint bank account would need to be split according to the prenup. "When do you want to file?" he asked. "As soon as possible." I said firmly. Great. He replied, "Getting it to Montana might need a bit of extra effort, but we manage that routine. I'll handle the paperwork and filing. If all goes smoothly, we could finalize this early next week. You'll just need to cover the filing fee and my service charge." And he asked me a few questions, but I just shook my head and said I didn't have any for now. He gave me his card and shook my hand. "Feel free to reach out if you need to." "Best of luck." I paid the fees and left the office. I called Sam as soon as I got into my car. I just wrapped up with the lawyer. I told him I needed to sort out some bank matters. "But let's talk about that job you mentioned. I'll be around." He said he was looking forward to it. After our conversation ended, he texted me directions to the campground at the bank. I found out Monica hadn't accessed the account yet, so I withdrew 60% off the money, opened a new account in my name, and Canal joint credit cards. I paid off the balances and ordered new at the moment and credit cards for myself. Then I drove to the campground, which is about 35 miles northeast of my home. Despite the longer drive, it gave me time to reflect. In just one day, I'd gone from being a contentedly married man looking forward to retiring with my wife, to discovering over 20 years of betrayal. 6 of those years I'd spent in a war zone, risking my life. I realized I was handling Monica's betrayal the way I would face an enemy in combat with calculated precision. Thankfully, there was Caitlin. I don't know how I'd cope. Her vitality, honesty, and comfort in bed were reassuring, but I worried about rushing into something new right after ending things with Monica. Eventually, I arrived at Camp Valor. Traffic had been light, so I sped up, only slowing down when I reached a gate guarded by a camouflage-clad sentry armed and ready. "I'm here to see Sam Jacobs." I said my name was Gavin Mitchell and handed him Sam's card and my driving license, as instructed. "I waited a moment, sir," the guard responded, scrutinizing my truck before heading back to the shack. I watched him put on a field phone for a few moments, before he returned and handed back my documents. "Commander Jacobs is expecting you. Welcome to Camp Valor," Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell, he declared before I could express my gratitude. He opened the gate and waved me through, negotiating a series of tight turns. I found myself inside a military-style camp. The premises were neat and tidy, with wooden structures surrounding a central area where men were drilling. The lawns were impeccably groomed. I parked and stepped out of the truck. An attractive blonde, dressed professionally, greeted me with a smile. "You must be Sergeant Mitchell," she said. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Welcome to Camp Valor," she said, extending her hand. "Commandant Jacobs is awaiting you. Would you like some coffee, Black?" "That would be great," I replied. "Of course," she replied with a nod. "Please come in." I knocked on the door to Jacobs' office and he waved me in while finishing up a phone call. His khaki uniform shirt displayed silver leaves, which I later learned were a symbol of his rank in the army. Once he hung up, he rose to greet me. "Glad you made it," he said with a smile. "Please take a seat." I settled into the chair as the receptionist brought my coffee. "Thank you," I said, taking a sip. "Just what I needed." "No issues getting here," I told him. "Your directions were spot on." I told him it was good, and he nodded before we got started. I said, "Let me tell you a bit about the guys who come here. Every guy here has been through a lot. Most have been cheated on, and some have been mistreated, physically, emotionally, or both. Betrayal and humiliation are common themes here. I can relate." He seemed surprised by the honesty, so I asked, "What's your approach?" He said the first thing is to focus, then build up their physical strength. They're not allowed any online access for 3 months. No emails, no Facebook, no YouTube. I joked that they must love that. Sam said that some of them were really attached to their phones before they came here. They were completely disconnected from their own lives. We take that distraction away and force them to confront their issues. How do they stay connected with their families? That's a valid concern. Sam nodded and said that we gave them a mailbox for correspondence. All communication is done through regular mail, with post offices and Bonner's Ferry and Clark Fork handling deliveries twice a week. It's quite a trek to reach them, but we aim to prevent distractions or interference from spouses. You mentioned security. I asked about any incidents. There have been attempts. Sam admitted we've thwarted them. It's all in the packet. I'll give you the details. I used the word thwarted. I wondered what it meant. I'd love to know more about the training program. Could you give me a quick overview? In the first month, we introduce them to a very intense schedule. It's a lot like boot camp. The day starts at 0500 with drills. They move quickly from one place to another, and there's no downtime. The physical training is very challenging, and they are under constant supervision. It sounds intense, but they're up for it. In the second month, they meet with counselors and continue their physical training. We also start self-defense lessons. In the third month, they focus on building on what they've learned and connecting with lawyers for any legal matters. Sam glanced at his watch. "Actually, there's a group session going on right now. You might want to sit in." "I agree. Let's go." We left his office and headed to another building. Inside, a group of men sat in a semicircle facing a female counselor. The instructor at the door nodded to Sam, then went back to his seat without saying anything. We sat at the back. One of the students was crying and sharing how his wife had degraded him, forcing him to perform humiliating acts for her lovers. The man's voice trembled, and his fellow students patted him on the shoulder, offering silent support. I glanced at the instructor, who was a burly man with Sergeant Shevin. I could see that he was angry. After the session, Sam signaled for me to follow him, and we left the building. The instructor was a big guy with Sergeant Shevin. You could see Sergeant Shevin's jaw was clenched, and he was angry as the student kept on sobbing. The counselor was looking after him, and I could see that I wanted to be a part of this organization. I wanted to help in any way I could. After the session, Sam signaled for me to follow him, and we left the building. He showed me around the camp, introducing me to the staff, and taking me to the instructor's quarters. There were a few guys there, all in khaki shirts, some of them Sergeant Siobhan, some of them Staff Sergeant. I chatted with them for a bit, and it turned out that half of them were ex-Marines, and the other half were from the ex-Army and COs. They were a close-knit group. The knitting group is really invested in their students. One of them asked if I wanted to join the team. I replied that I was interested. Sam grinned and announced that he'd asked Gavin to be our new senior instructor. Gavin is on terminal leave for now, but Sam wants him to spend time getting to know everyone. The others nodded in agreement. One of them said, "Welcome aboard, Gunny," and shook my hand. The others echoed this, so I thanked them and said I'd be happy to help out with camp activities. In Sam's office, we discussed the camp's activities. "So you're in," Sam said. "Yes," I replied. "Welcome aboard," he said. "Why'd you decide to join us?" he asked. After hearing that man's counseling session, I explained that I'd realized these things actually happen. I'd always thought they were just stories you read online. Sam nodded. "It's more common than people realize." He then handed me a document with a laugh. "By the way, I should make this official. I was astonished by the offer, a salary far beyond what I made in the military and an impressive benefits package. Naturally, I accepted." "Okay," Sam said, passing me a stack of folders. I joked that I might need to keep my hands busy for the next few weeks. He laughed and said I was welcome to drop by any time. "I definitely wanted to attend the cow burning ceremony," I said. He explained that it was a tradition at the end of each session. "I think you'll find it interesting," he added. The next 3 weeks passed quickly. Monica received and signed the divorce papers without a fuss. My attorney told me the divorce would be finalized in 30 days. Caitlin started her own proceedings against Eric, but hers would take about 90 days since she filed in Washington. I never heard from Monica again, and to be honest, I didn't really care. About 2 weeks after the divorce filing, her parents came to collect her belongings. To collect her belongings, I gave them a cashier's check from Monica's share of the bank accounts, and all the photos of her I could find. I wanted to get rid of anything in the house that reminded me of her. Her mother mentioned that Monica was too embarrassed to face me, which didn't surprise me. I also mentioned that while Caitlin spent the last 3 weekends with me, we had a blast. Unlike Monica, Caitlin embraced it eagerly. She even cooked the salmon we caught. I also visited the camp a couple times a week to chat with the instructors. I learned they were all combat veterans and had been through divorces themselves. A few were even entering a new phase in their lives. I spent weekends with her, and we had a great time. I took her fishing at Lake Pendor, and unlike Monica, Caitlin was really enthusiastic about it. She even cooked the salmon we caught. I also went to the camp a couple of times a week to chat with the instructors. I learned they were all combat veterans and had been through divorces themselves. A few were even entering new relationships. I also went to a few group counseling sessions to get a better understanding of why the students were there. Their stories really moved me. I also found out why the camp was so heavily guarded. One student had been targeted by an organization called Mace. He had left his wife and gone to the camp to get away from it all. But Mace was relentless. They tried to attack the camp with guns, but the guards stopped them. The guards were from a different government agency. The camp now had strict rules. If anyone mentioned Mace, they had to tell the agency right away. At the end of the month, Sam invited me to watch the cow burning ceremony. This was to mark the end of the 3-month program. At the end of the month, I drove to the camp in my Class C uniform. The ceremony took place at night, and Sam and I stood back as spectators, while the students attached pictures of their wives to a straw figure. The figure was hoisted up and tied to a pole surrounded by firewood. One student was called forward and handed a lit torch, which he set to the wood, causing it to blaze. The teacher gave the student an order, who immediately obeyed. The student lit the fire, and the flames quickly engulfed the straw figure. The students chanted "burn, burn, burn" as the figure was consumed by fire. When it collapsed into ash, they erupted into cheers. Some even relieved themselves on the smoldering remains. The spectacle continued until the figure was completely burned. I thought, "What's the point of this?" I asked, turning to Sam. He said it offers the men closure. It allows them to release their inner turmoil without resorting to violence against their spouses. Tomorrow they'll graduate, ready to confront life's challenges. Just imagine, 3 months ago, they arrived broken. Tomorrow they leave as the men were visibly reinvigorated. I nodded, picturing Monica's symbolically bound and consumed by flames. The thought brought a subtle smile to my lips. "How are things at home?" Sam asked. "Proceeding well," I replied. "How are you coping?" he inquired. "I'm managing," I said. "Better than expected." "Good to hear," he replied. "Your break?" "In a few days, to be exact, just 3 days." I was really happy to hear that. "I'm looking forward to meeting our new students who arrive in 4 days. You'll need to be ready for them." He handed me a small box, which was inside. It was a set of polished Chev Sergeant Majors. I asked him, and he confirmed that this means your role as senior instructor. "Well done." "Thank you," I said, grinning. "No," he countered. "Thank you. Over the next few days, Over the next few days, I spent time with Caitlin Elroy. She'd agreed to be bought out of the house, and he'd suggested moving Monica in, which made Caitlin eager to leave. I suggested she move in with me, and she was happy to accept. I'd rented a trailer to help her move and settled her into my home. It would be snug at first, but I was confident we could make it work. The next morning, Caitlin came over for breakfast. She gave me a lavish breakfast and kissed me goodbye. "Keep up with them," she urged with a smile. "I will," I promised, unsure where my relationship with Caitlin would lead. I was open to exploring it so far. She had filled the void left by Monica, and I couldn't recall feeling this content in a long time. When I arrived at the camp, I checked my appearance in the mirror, adjusted my uniform, and stepped out of the truck. I scanned a small group of men in the parking lot. I muttered to myself how they expect me to mold men when they don't even send proper human beings to start with. I told them to remove this pathetic lot from my sight and begin processing them before I lose my temper. I turned and spotted Sam grinning from ear to ear. "Excellent job," he said. "Welcome to Camp Valor."